One of the biggest leadership challenges isn't getting things done. That's what most people think.
Yep.
It's helping other people do things well. And too often, we as leaders get stuck in a frustrating cycle. We either hold on too tight or we let go too fast. Why? Because most of us as leaders don't have a clear framework for what the learning process actually looks like. And that's where the development square comes in. It's a simple but powerful tool that helps you understand how people move from, I have no idea what I'm doing, to, I've got this. And how you as a leader need to show up differently in each stage. We're breaking this tool into 2 episodes. In this first episode, we're going to unveil the 4 stages every person goes through when they're developing in any new area. How we move from novice to expert, immature to mature, from infant to adulthood. In the next episode, we'll unpack those 4 styles of leadership that we can practice to partner others on their developmental journey. So in this episode, all about how we develop, no matter who we are in any new area. And the next episode, how can we partner with others to effectively give them the best chance of growing into a better version of themselves. I'm Eric Pfeiffer, and in this episode, I'm joined by Don Neldon. If you've ever felt stuck between micromanaging and letting people flounder, this episode is going to give you a better way.
That's right. And I love to look at this initially with babies in mind, because it can be really difficult to look at ourselves and understand how we are growing and developing, how we learn new things, but we can see it very clearly when we look at babies. And the best example is when a kid is learning how to walk for the first time. They get up, they stumble, they bumble, but they keep trying. And those initial steps are wiggly and wobbly, but eventually they take really more and more confidence in their steps. And before you know it, they're off and running. And for whatever reason, it's really clear for us when we are, for example, helping our kids learn how to walk or helping our kids learn how to tie their shoes. And we forget that in our own lives, we still have to go through a process of learning how to do new things. I think that this is like with the advent of the internet, we just think we should know how to do everything, right? Like we should be able to watch a YouTube and rebuild an engine in a car, you know? I feel like I see this more and more lately where people just want to bypass the learning stage and go directly to expert status in anything. And I get it. Being in that learning phase is uncomfortable and it feels really exposed. But we will never get to the point of, I've got this, I'm an expert at this thing, unless we realize that we actually have to go through the whole process, the wiggles, the wobbles, the stumbles, the bumbles, and that's all part of the process.
Well, let me just jump in and say this. This tool that we're going to be unpacking really came to life for me years ago. My now 20-year-old son, back then he was about, 10 years old, and he had just gotten this new video game he was really excited about, and he wanted me to play with him. And so as we jumped into playing the game, he was so super excited and super pumped. He's unpacking the game and he's putting it in and we're firing it up, and we jump into level 1 and there we are going after things. And I don't even remember what the nature of the game was, but he was super excited and I was excited with him. But very quickly, as we were trying to together pass this first level, we kept failing. Thank God for video games that, you just have almost unlimited lives or you push reset. But his frustration grew to the point, one point he throws his game controller on the floor. He's crying. I hate this game. This is so stupid. And I remember feeling shocked, like, whoa, this is a really strong response. But the reason I was intrigued is I'm like, you know what? His response in this moment,
so good,
feeling defeated and overwhelmed and like he just can't figure it out, reminded me of how I have felt so many times whenever I'm trying to learn anything new, whether it's typing with my fingers on the home keys of a computer, keyboard, or whether it was, I remember learning how to really understand finances from our family and then from the business perspective. There's so many areas where I was like, I know this feeling, what he's going through right now. What's interesting is, as I encouraged him and helped him kind of get back into the video game. We took a break, got back into it. Over time, like we started to learn how the video game works. We started to learn some of the tricks to the trade. And eventually we found that we passed level 1 and we were super excited and we celebrate. But guess what? Then there's level 2.
Right.
And I'm pretty convinced we never reached the end of this game. It had an infinite number of levels, but that so much reminds me of what we experience in life. Any area that we in life have conquered, have mastered, have become experts in, required this developmental learning process. And it's the same for us as human beings from our biological perspective as we go from infant to adulthood. It's the same as we're trying to master any new skill or ability, is we have to go through these stages of growth, which requires that we go through this season of difficulty where we want to give up. And we're going to talk more about this, but I think it's really important because as leaders, I think oftentimes the misnomer is, well, I've achieved this title, this position, I should just know how to do everything. And I want our listeners to hear this. With all of the leaders I have ever worked with, no matter how high of a level they are, whether they're C-suite, owner, operator, CEO, I don't care if it's a multi-billion-dollar organization or a small startup. The reality is every one of these leaders at some point in the coaching process confides in me, Eric, I hate having to admit that I don't know how to do something. It scares me. When I ask them why, they say the same thing every time, because I'm afraid if other people see that I don't know what I'm doing, then they're going to lose confidence in me, that maybe that will disqualify me for my role or my responsibility. And I have to encourage them the same way every time. And I want to encourage our listeners to understand that if, as a leader or in any area of your life, you're struggling, you feel like you're underwater, you feel like you're not getting something, you're not learning something, you're not where you want to be, that actually you're probably right where you should be. Because learning is hard. And until we can embrace that and also accept the fact that as leaders, we have to be ready to model that we're willing to be on our own learning journey so that other people have permission to be on their learning journey. And that actually creates greater trust and confidence in a leader when others can say, hey, they're willing to say, I don't know. They're willing to say, I haven't quite figured this out yet. They're willing to say, I'm still figuring this out. As a matter of fact, I would say it's almost counterintuitive to who we are as humans because we hate to suck at stuff.
Yes, we do.
And therefore, we avoid it like the plague, which only robs us of these incredible growth opportunities.
Absolutely. And we have seen time and time again that the I should know how to do this by now fear is kryptonite to leaders. That is the sentiment that is going to keep you stuck. It is going to keep you afraid, and it's going to keep you from growing and developing into the person that you are trying to become. That's why this tool is so powerful, because it is going to demystify this process for our listeners. Eric, would you jump in and just kind of break down the tool for us?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, a couple of things. I want to say this at the beginning that, we owe the principles of this tool to Ken Blanchard and his work on situational leadership. And so we just borrowed some of the principles. We've innovated a little bit like we do with most of our leadership tools to make them more simple, accessible, and user-friendly for our clients. Now, the tool is simply in the shape of a square. And a square, as we all know, has 4 sides, which helps us understand right at the start that there are 4 stages that we have to pass through. There's no, skip, go, and collect $200. There's no circumventing any of these 4 phases. These are 4 requisite stages that we all have to go through when we are trying to grow, develop, learn any new skill, ability, and there's so many other benefits that come along with it. So as we think of a square, the first stage of any developmental process is we are captivated by a vision. And there's 2 kinds of vision that we can be captivated by. The first is a vision that springs up from within us. I remember watching my older brother ride a bike for the first time. And I remember thinking, I can't wait to learn how to ride a bike. I remember seeing him drive a car, got his license, thinking, I want to learn how to drive a car, right? So sometimes a vision starts within us. We catch a picture of a future that we want for ourselves. And that motivates us or inspires us to want to jump into this adventure. The other way a vision can come to us is sometimes from our parents when they say, you're going to learn how to clean your room. You're going to learn how to set the table. You're going to learn how to take out the trash, right? Or a teacher says, you're going to learn some kind of arithmetic, or a boss says you're going to have to learn this computer program. Any way you look at it, vision can start from within us or come from outside of us. But the vision is what gets us willing to leave kind of the land of familiarity and comfort, the way things have always been, and to embark on an adventure of learning something new. And so this first stage I like to call the honeymoon stage.
Oh, yeah.
Technically, we refer to it as D1, right? The development phase 1, right? Because we want to make everything really simple and practical. So in this first phase, we need to understand it is marked by the experience for us as the learner by unconscious incompetence.
Yep.
In other words, we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
We're green. We don't know what we're getting ourselves into, but we're excited either because we're inspired to learn something or because we're inspired enough by an authority figure to say, I better learn this or else. And this first phase is marked by excitement, and there's a real sense of confidence. I can do this. What we'll learn later is it's really a naive confidence, right? That I can figure this out, not a problem. I'm smart enough, I'm good enough, I'm strong enough, I'm fast enough, whatever, I'll figure it out. But eventually, that first phase, because it can't last forever, runs into what we call the second phase, or D2, or development phase number 2. This is the phase where we start to really try our hand at this new skill or ability or task. And we quickly find out, I don't know what I don't know. So the unconscious incompetence turns into conscious incompetence. We run into our deficiencies, our inadequacies, our inexperience. The fact that maybe we've never done this thing before. It doesn't matter what it is. It could be a skill in the workplace, a new hobby, a new area you're wanting to develop in your marriage, whether it's communication or conflict. Maybe it's budgeting your finances, whatever the case is. We all know this experience of feeling like we're falling into a pit, or I like to refer to D2 as underwater. Phase 1 is honeymoon. Phase 2 is underwater. Oh my gosh, this is so much harder than I thought. I'm not sure I'm ever going to get this. And in this phase, all human beings experience kind of 4 core temptations. The first one is the obvious one. This is stupid. I'm not sure why I'm having to learn this. I want to quit. The second one is, you know what? This is dumb. I can't believe this isn't working. And so we start to blame everyone and everything around us for why we can't figure this out. The third phase is all about resigning, or what we call silent quitting. This isn't working. I've tried it so many times. And trust me, anybody who's been married longer than like a year knows what silent quitting feels like. I just don't know how to do this. I don't know how to resolve an argument. And so, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to be quiet and I'm going to avoid, right? So, and then there's a fourth one. Off the top of my head, I can't remember. Do you remember what it was? We normally have 4, and I just remembered 3.
I was so in it with you. Okay, we did.
I know, I was in it too. We'll get back to it, but what is it? So there's quitting,
Quitting.
blaming.
Gestures.
Oh, thank you. So there's quitting, blaming, there's silent quitting, or resignation, as we like to say it. And then there's also, you know what? This relationship isn't working. This job isn't working. This hobby isn't working. So I'll trade it in for a new shiny one. We call it looking for greener grass, or looking for a new vision. All 4 of these are temptations that will derail a very, very critical part of our learning journey, because whenever we're going to learn something new, we're going to have to contend with the fact that we don't know how to do it yet, which means we're not good at it, which can be very discouraging, feel very lonely. It starts to take a toll on our ego and our fragile egos and our pride. Here's what I tell people. This second phase, if we'll persevere through it, is actually the phase where we develop greater character, where we develop stick-to-itiveness, perseverance, patience, self-belief, and a renewed sense of confidence that we can learn new things. And so I tell people, don't mistake D2 for necessarily this is something bad. Of course, there are always situations in which we decide, you know what, this actually isn't a good fit. This isn't working. But far too often, we give way to those temptations and jump ship long before we've had the opportunity to really grow and develop. And so we not only grow in our character in D2, but we actually, during that process, start to develop new skills. Now, mind you, we're not experts. We're barely keeping maybe our head above water, but transformation is taking place. And I often have to tell people, when you're in a D2 phase, you desperately, desperately need people around you who can encourage you to stay in it. Because even though it's hard, it's a good hard. And all of us have experiences through our life where we can look back and say, yeah, I persevered through the difficulty of that learning journey and it paid off. Now, if we're able to persevere through D2, we move into the third developmental phase, D3, which I call the I'm getting it phase, right? And we're now starting to figure it out, the new skill, the new ability. We've developed a little bit more character. So we're staying in the fight. And this is the place where we're starting to experience conscious competence, right? Now, here's an interesting thing about D3 is that very often we get in D3, and we think, okay, the learning journey is over. It's not over. It's a really important part of the process because it's in D3 that we begin to develop a sense of initiative, personal responsibility. We start saying, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can own this. Really, really important. We have a growing sense of confidence. But in D3, if we're not careful, if we don't continue to practice what we've been learning, then oftentimes what I find is people start to stall out.
Yeah.
So we need to continue through this third phase until we eventually reach D4 or development phase 4, which is marked by unconscious competence. Now we have developed this skill to the point where we feel like we can do it like the back of our hand. I tell people, great examples. Most of us, when we get in the car and drive to work, we're not thinking about how to turn the car on. We're not thinking about how to drive. We're not even thinking about how to get to work unless
Yeah.
you're in a high traffic area. We just know how to do it. And this is where our learning has moved from the front of our brain into the back of our brain, into the long-term memory. And the beautiful thing about anything we learn to the fourth phase of development becomes something that we can tap into at any point in our life or into the future, not only for our benefit, but now we have something to share with others. And so I constantly remind leaders the importance of being on our own developmental journey is so that we constantly have new wisdom, experience, and insights to share with others around us.
Yeah, that's so good. There are, in fact, really important things that we need to learn and take away from each phase that to the point where if we try to skip one phase, we're never going to reach that unconscious competence where we are just what we also call like that flow state where you are operating at your best. You can
Yeah.
do it in a minimal amount of time. One thing I want to bring to our listeners' attention here, though, is that when we're learning the development square, we can sometimes think that this is how a person develops as a whole, right? So I am on a developmental journey. And one time I am going to go through the 4 stages. But the reality is, for us and for anybody else in our lives, each new thing that we are learning is a new square.
Yeah.
So we like to talk about big squares and little squares, even. If you think of, like, for example, I always think this really clearly is illustrated about when I was trying to learn Spanish. And I had to go through the initial square just on the concept of learning Spanish, but each time I had to learn a new verb tense or a new colloquial dialect, like you're going through another process of the square. And so as you are looking at even this concept of learning about how to learn how to do things, you are going to go through the development square. And we can fall into the trap of thinking, well, I did that once. I learned how to do something. Why, I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Each new thing is going to be a square. And some squares, our big squares, are going to take us months or years, like learning Spanish. Some squares are small and are going to take us a day, a week,
Yeah. Well, what you're illustrating for us is what I like to call the difference between the macro versus the micro journeys, or macro versus micro squares. In that, let me give an example, right? Because obviously one of the things we always want to do is provide some examples of what does this actually look like in real time. And in this episode, I want to talk about my own journey. And so I had been a part for over a decade of of helping another person build a coaching company. And I had my own, developmental process, as I was learning how to coach and the toolkit that we were utilizing at that time and how to train other coaches. And so I had my own kind of macro squares in terms of, macro squares, like, how do I coach other leaders effectively? But then there were all the micro squares. I had to learn each tool and the application of each tool and the nuance of when I'm in a coaching call, how to engage, how to ask good questions. These were all micro squares. Well, in the same way, when I started Empower Coaching, I had never started a company before. And so it was my first kind of real foray into entrepreneurial work. And so just let's start from the beginning. Like where we're at today in the building of this coaching company, I'd say we're probably, in some areas we're like in the D2 or we're feeling overwhelmed and frustrated. And as we're creating content and our content platform and trying to release new resources and who do we hire to do the video work and how do we make sure that marketing's working right? Right. There's a lot of areas where we're in D2. There's a lot of areas where we're in D3, where we feel like we've got a handle on it. We know our platform, we know our coaching framework, we know how to coach well. And so in some ways, from a macro perspective, our companies, somehow sometimes in D2, sometimes in D3, macro, but micro, from micro squares, I had to learn like, how do you start a business? How do you file the paperwork? How do you finance this? How do you forecast and budget for the future? How do you, what do you do about taxes at the end of the year? What can you and can you not spend your company money on? Like there's so many small areas that I've had to grow and develop in as a leader, whether it's building a team or how to hire and fire people or, how to find new clients, how to create your client pipeline. How do we record videos on social media? Nobody just wakes up one day and knows how to do anything.
Yeah.
And so even in my journey as an entrepreneur leader starting a coaching company, I can say that there's this macro square that our company's always evolving and growing on from a large picture perspective. But then there are always going to be these smaller areas that as we step into new areas of growth, development, as we're trying to take new territory, as we're trying to develop new products, as we're trying to build our team out, that it's constantly learning new things, which quite frankly can become really fatiguing, which is why for myself and for our listeners, we've got to learn to celebrate the squares that we've already been around where we've reached D3 and D4, because that's oftentimes what fuels us to be willing to embark in new learning adventures.
Yeah, that is so good. The process on some levels is constant and to that degree can feel very fatiguing. But on the other hand, it can be really liberating to know that there's never a moment that you arrive and you're like, I have learned, I have got it.
I've learned everything I need to learn.
Everything I need to learn, which in some ways frees us up to be learners, to not be experts in certain areas, and to ask for help or to just recognize where we are on our own journey, macro and micro. I think that's so, so helpful.
Yeah, I would say that, if this tool, there's so much more than we can unpack in this one episode, but if this tool can encourage our listeners by giving us permission, because so often we don't know how to give ourselves permission. So one of the things this tool does is it gives us permission to do two things. One that you've already mentioned, I'll come back to it, but the first one I want to say is it gives us permission to stumble, fumble, bumble our way into growth because it's necessary. Like we need to give ourselves permission to be in the pit, to feel like we're underwater, to feel like we're really struggling, to feel like we need help. That's okay because it's a necessary part of the journey. And too often we mistake the difficulties that it's bad, right? I mean, when I'm in the gym and I'm on the treadmill and I've walked, however many miles on the treadmill that day and my body's fatiguing, I feel tired. Oftentimes I'm like, this is bad. This hurts. This is uncomfortable. This is disorientating. But a good trainer will step up and say, hey, listen, this is a good bad or hard. I'm sorry, a good hard. Because sometimes we have to remember that hard actually means we're growing. Discomfort, disorientation actually means we're probably in a process of moving toward growth and reorientation. but we don't grow without going through that second phase. And this tool gives us permission to go through it rather than to think, well, it's hard, it's bad, I need to get out of it as quickly as possible. The second thing this tool gives us permission to do is, I think, to regain perspective on the value and importance that we as leaders have to model, have to embody this willingness to be on a continual developmental journey, right? And like, I never forget, like, getting to a certain age, my early 20s, and realizing, you know what, my parents don't know everything.
Yeah.
They haven't figured it all out. Like, they're not perfect. Like, they have a lot of areas they need to grow into. But as a little child, you think your parents know everything. You think they were just kind of born that way. They have the playbook on everything parenting. And then you realize, no, actually, they're still growing. They're still developing. And that was radically liberating for me, because once I was able to give my parents permission to continue growing and developing, that in some way reminded me, I need to give myself permission to continue growing and developing. They've grown in a lot of areas, but there's always going to be new ways that they have to develop, whether it's parenting teenagers versus parenting adults, or the way my parents have interacted with our spouses and their grandkids, right? Like, they're constantly learning and growing. And I
Yeah.
think as leaders, when we fight to embody this core value that we're constantly learning, I think it just gives permission to everybody around us.
So good. Yeah. I have very similar experiences where I first learned that, oh, just because you're older doesn't mean you know how to do everything. Oh, at once, liberating and frustrating.
Very concerned. First time.
All right. Well, as we close out this episode, a couple things I want to make sure that our listeners are subscribed, because the
Oh,
next
hold on, Don. We need to give them some simple practical action steps that they can take to
You're
apply
so right.
immediately.
I'm
No,
so sorry. I'm so sorry. You are right. My
we're so
apologies.
excited about getting more subscribers. We forgot we need to give them some practical goodies.
You are right.
All right, so
Right.
a couple practical things for our listeners, if you want to immediately put this into use, is the first thing we can do is simply reflect on where in our life currently do we find ourselves in a D1 phase, in that honeymoon phase. Something's new, exciting. Maybe it's a new relationship, maybe it's a new job, maybe it's a new stage of your child's growth and development, and maybe it's a new hobby, maybe whatever it is, a new economic, season of life where you're flourishing, right? So we love being in that D1 phase because it's inspired, it's motivating, it's new vision, which is awesome. But we also have to recognize, where in our life are we currently in a D2 phase, where we feel, man, we're underwater, we might be drowning, we're overwhelmed, we want to give up, we want to quit, we feel like we're blaming everybody around us. Maybe that's in your job role, maybe you're struggling with your relationship with your boss or some coworkers, or maybe you feel like you've just entered into a sales position, you're just not making many sales, or whether that's maybe you've started a company and you're freaking out, feeling like, I don't even have a clue what I'm doing. We need to identify, where do we resonate with that D2 experience in our life currently. Also, the third phase, like, where are we in D3? Where do we feel like, you know what? I've come through the storm. I've come through the most difficult part of this learning journey. I feel like I'm starting to wrap my head around this. I'm not an expert. I still have to think a lot about what I'm doing, but I feel like I'm in D3. And then where am I in D4? And as we identify where in our life currently we're experiencing potentially each of these 4 developmental phases, that's the beginning of self-awareness. And self-awareness is so important, because if we don't know where we are, then we can't do this second part of this practical application, which is this: to give yourself permission to be in that phase, right? Too often we're in D2 wishing we were in D4, right? Or we're in D2 wishing we can go back to D1, go back to a time when I felt excited and, and motivated by this. But it's so important that we learn to give ourselves permission to be where we are in our developmental journey, because that's the only place we can be. And by giving ourselves permission to be there, it's going to unlock a little bit more energy, a little bit more mental margin to engage in that phase, right? Because when things are difficult or we're not sure where we are, we feel disorientated. Oftentimes what happens is we start to avoid that process of growth, or we want to, just abandon ship altogether. So knowing where we are and giving ourselves permission to be where we are is the beginning of really embracing and and optimizing our growth journey.
So good. And allowing us to really mine the gems that each phase has to offer us. So with that, because we always want to leave you with practical application.
Yes.
Our tools are, if they don't feel like they move the needle for you, then we're not doing our job, because our tools at their core are practical handles that you can use for transformation. And we always want to leave you with some of that. But that being said, we want to encourage you to subscribe, because our next episode is where we are going to teach you how to layer on the leadership style to the development square that will basically unlock for you how you can lead your people well in every phase of their own developmental journey. So this next episode is going to be transformational, and you don't want to miss it. So make sure you subscribe. And also, I'd be willing to bet that you heard some things in this episode that made you think of another leader in your life, or somebody who's going through something similar, somebody who's starting a business, somebody who's growing a team, somebody who's trying to level up their leadership. And we'd love if you'd send this to them. There's no better message that you can send than, hey, I'm cheering you on in your leadership journey. And I think this episode would really spark you where you're at right now. So we'd love if you'd share this. And then lastly, head to our show notes, because every episode we drop in an image of our tools, because they are at their core visual tools, so you can see them and get a better grasp on them. And also, while you're there, we have a free gift for you. It's our mini course of 5 shifts to become the leader that you wish you had. At any rate, we are so excited to keep growing together, and we look forward to the next episode where we get to dig into some leadership strategies with you.